What happens when the fairy tale shatters in the most public way imaginable? When the man who vowed to protect you becomes the monster everyone sees. This isn't just a story about wealth and glamour. It's about the gilded cage, the whispers in hallways, and the moment a woman pushed to her absolute limit decides she will not break, she will detonate. Tonight, we delve into the story of Elara Blackwood, a woman 8 months pregnant, standing at the most prestigious charity gala of the year. We'll witness the moment her billionaire husband, Julian, in a fit of rage, ripped her couture gown from her body. The gasp that echoed through the ballroom, the shocking turn of events that followed, and the one single name she uttered that brought an entire era to its knees. Stick with me, because the truth is always more shocking than the headlines. The air in our penthouse apartment overlooking the sprawling city lights was thick with the scent of Julian's ambition. It smelled like expensive cologne Cuban cigars, and something metallic and cold, like money that had forgotten the warmth of a human hand. Tonight was the annual Blackwood Foundation Gala, the crown jewel of Julian's philanthropic and social calendar. For me, it was just another command performance. Is the Marchesa not fitting correctly? Elara Julian's voice, smooth as single malt scotch, cut through the silence of our cavernous dressing room. He stood behind me, his reflection sharp and predatory in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. He wasn't looking at the dress, he was assessing an asset. I was 8 months pregnant, a swollen, uncomfortable vessel carrying the heir to his tech empire, Blackwood Innovations. The dress, a cascade of midnight blue silk and delicate crystals that he had personally selected, felt less like a garment and more like a beautiful restrictive cage. It clung to my belly, the fabric whispering threats with every deep breath I took. It's a little tight across the ribs, Julian. That's all I murmured, trying to adjust the boning that dug into my skin. He stepped closer, his hands landing on my shoulders, his grip just a fraction too firm. It needs to be perfect. You are a reflection of me tonight. Everything must be flawless. His eyes in the mirror weren't filled with husbandly affection. They were the eyes of a CEO reviewing a quarterly report and finding a rounding error. For the past 3 years, I had learned to live with the flawless expectation. Julian Blackwood hadn't married me, a quiet architect with a love for sustainable design and old books. He had acquired me. I was the soft piece of his portfolio, the elegant, cultured wife who sanded down his rough new money edges. He'd plucked me from my comfortable middle-class life and placed me in this sterile glass and steel tower, and I, blinded by what I thought was love, had mistaken the altitude for heaven. Lately, however, the air has grown thin. The chill in our home had nothing to do with the state-of-the-art climate control. It was in the hushed phone calls Julian would take on the terrace, his back to me, his voice a low, urgent murmur. It was in the late nights he blamed on investor meetings that left his shirts smelling faintly of a perfume. I didn't own a sharp, spicy scent like night-blooming jasmine and confidence, and it was in a name that had started to pepper his conversations like a nervous tick, Serafina. Serafina Moreau, CEO of Phoenix Dynamics, a rival tech firm that Julian was obsessed with acquiring. At first he spoke of her with a grudging, almost violent respect. "She's a shark, that woman," he'd say, swirling his brandy. "Ruthless, but brilliant." Then the comments became more frequent, more personal. He'd mention an article he read about her, a conference she was speaking at. The mentions were casual, too casual, like a man trying to convince himself of his own indifference. My best friend, Chloe, A journalist who could smell a lie from a mile away had warned me. "He talks about her like a conquest, Elara," she'd said over coffee last week, her eyes full of concern. "And I don't just mean her company." I'd brushed it off, a knot of denial tightening in my stomach. I was pregnant with his child. He was difficult controlling and emotionally distant, but he wasn't a cliché. He wouldn't do that. Not now. "The car is waiting," Julian said, snapping me back to the present. He ran a hand down the silk of my dress, his touch proprietary. "Remember to smile, darling, and let me do the talking, especially if Marcus Thorne approaches. The man is a vulture." Marcus Thorne was Julian's former business partner, and now his biggest competitor. Their fallout had been legendary in the tech world, and they now circled each other at every event, looking for weakness. As I slipped on my diamond earrings, a push present Julian had given me months early, as if to prepay for the inconvenience of childbirth. A sharp, sudden pain seized my lower back. I winced, my hand flying to my stomach. "What is it now?" Julian sighed, his impatience palpable. "Nothing. Just a Braxton Hicks." I lied. It felt different, sharper. A premonition. He straightened his tie, his gaze sweeping over me one last time. "Good. No drama tonight, Elara. The Vanguard Fund investors will be there. I need this to go smoothly. Everything depends on it." He walked out, leaving me alone with my reflection. The woman staring back at me looked like a stranger. Her eyes were shadowed with a weariness that no amount of concealer could hide. She was draped in wealth, but she looked utterly impoverished of spirit. As I turned to follow him, the midnight blue silk of the dress pulled taut across my belly, and for a terrifying second, I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was a feeling that would only get worse. The Blackwood Foundation Gala was held at the city's grandest art museum, the soaring marble atrium temporarily transformed into a glittering sea of high society. Chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen tears, and the air hummed with the sound of forced laughter and the clinking of champagne flutes. To the outside world, this was the pinnacle of philanthropy. To me, it was Julian's personal theatre, and I was the lead actress in a play I hadn't auditioned for. Julian's hand was a manacle on the small of my back, guiding me through the throng. He was in his element, a king holding court. He'd clap a senator on the back, share a conspiratorial whisper with a hedge fund manager, and flash a brilliant, predatory smile for the photographers. With each step, he would lean in and murmur instructions in my ear. "That's David Johnson. His company is ripe for a takeover. Be charming. Avoid Beatrice's table for now. She's in a mood. Smile, Elara. You look miserable. People will talk." Beatrice Blackwood. My mother-in-law was a woman carved from ice. She sat at the head table, her posture ramrod straight, her diamonds flashing like warnings. She had never approved of me making it clear from our first meeting that she considered my modest background a stain on the family's pristine, albeit recently acquired pedigree. As we passed her table, her cold blue eyes raked over my pregnant form with disdain. "Goodness, Elara," she said, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. "That dress is certainly ambitious. Let's hope you don't burst a seam before dessert." Julian squeezed my back painfully, a silent command to ignore her. I forced a tight smile, the humiliation of a hot flush creeping up my neck. We moved on, but her words lingered another small crack in my carefully constructed facade. The night wore on in a blur of air kisses and meaningless conversations. I felt like a ghost, floating on the edge of my own life, my body aching with a deep, rhythmic pain that I was desperately trying to ignore. I excused myself under the pretense of needing the powder room just to find a quiet corner and breathe for a moment. It was in a secluded alcove, hidden behind a large marble statue, that I overheard it. Two women, dripping in designer gowns and oblivious to my presence, were gossiping. "Can't believe he brought her here," one whispered, fanning herself. "It's beyond brazen." "Please," the other scoffed. "Julian Blackwood thrives on brazen. I heard he's not even trying to hide it anymore. My husband saw him leaving the Carlisle with her just last week. Serafina Moreau. Can you imagine the woman he's supposedly in a bidding war with? Well, it's one way to conduct a hostile takeover." The first woman giggled. The blood drained from my face. My breath hitched. It wasn't just a business obsession. It was real. The perfume, the late nights, the name, Serafina. The sound of it was a physical blow. I steadied myself against the cold marble, the sharp cramps in my abdomen intensifying, mirroring the twisting pain in my heart. I stumbled back toward the ballroom, my mind reeling. I had to find Julian. I had to see his face when I what? What could I possibly say? My world was tilting on its axis, and the only person I could cling to was the very man pushing me off the edge. And then I saw her. Across the room, standing next to Julian, was a woman who commanded attention without demanding it. She was tall and striking, with hair the color of molten copper, pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She wore a tailored blood-red pantsuit that was a bold, defiant statement in a sea of soft gowns. She laughed at something Julian said, her head tilted back, a look of shared intimacy passing between them that was so raw, so obvious, it stole the air from my lungs. It was Serafina Moreau. Julian saw me watching. For a fleeting second, a flicker of panic crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by a mask of cold fury. He excused himself from Serafina and began striding toward me, his path cutting through the crowd like a shark through water. The smile was gone. The polished veneer was gone. All that was left was rage. The king of this castle had spotted a flaw in the production, and he was coming to correct it. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep, and propelled me toward the nearest exit, a set of French doors leading to a deserted stone terrace. The cool night air was a shock to my heated skin, but it did nothing to quell the firestorm raging inside me. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He pushed the doors shut behind us, encasing us in a bubble of furious silence, the sounds of the gala now a muted, mocking rhythm. "What am I doing?" I pulled my arm from his grasp, my voice trembling, but gaining strength with every word of truth I'd been suppressing. "What are you doing, Julian, standing there with her laughing while your pregnant wife is treated like a piece of furniture? Do not start, Elara. Not here, not tonight," he warned, stepping into my space, using his height to intimidate me. Serafina Moreau is a business rival. That conversation was about the Phoenix Dynamics acquisition. Nothing more. "Don't you dare lie to me." The words ripped out of me raw and ragged. "I heard them, Julian. The whispers. Everyone knows. Everyone in this whole damn museum knows you're sleeping with her." A muscle twitched in his jaw. The denial in his eyes faltered, replaced by a chilling contempt. "And what if I am?" he sneered. "What exactly are you going to do about it? You have nothing. You are nothing without me. I gave you this life, this name. This poor child you're carrying is a Blackwood. You would do well to remember that." His cruelty was so profound, so absolute, it was almost paralyzing. He saw me not as his wife or the mother of his child, but as an ungrateful employee he could fire at will. The pain in my abdomen was a constant sharp throb now, a physical manifestation of my heartbreak. This life. I choked out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. This life is a prison, Julian. And that child, I placed a protective hand on my belly, is the only real thing in it. Something you wouldn't know the first thing about. You are embarrassing me. He seethed, his face contorting with rage. You come out here making a scene, looking like a bloated, hysterical mess in a dress you clearly can't fit into anymore. He gestured wildly at my body, his eyes filled with disgust. And then he did it. In a fit of pure, unadulterated fury at his loss of control, he reached out and grabbed the delicate, crystal-beaded neckline of my Marchesa gown. This whole pathetic charade is over, he roared. With a violent tug, he ripped the fabric. The sound was shockingly loud in the quiet of the terrace. A sharp, brutal shrap as the fine silk and delicate stitching gave way. The sound of my life tearing apart. The entire bodice of the dress was torn open from the neckline down to my ribs, exposing my skin. My maternity bra and the top swell of my pregnant belly to the cold night air. I gasped, stumbling backward, my hands flying up to cover myself. I stared at him, my mind unable to process what had just happened. The shock was a physical blow more stunning than a slap. He hadn't just torn a piece of clothing. He had stripped me of my dignity. He had physically, violently demonstrated what he thought of me. I was disposable, an object to be broken when it no longer pleased him. Through the glass of the French doors, I saw a face. Marcus Thorne. Julian's rival was standing just inside his expression, one of utter frozen shock. He had seen it. Someone had seen it. Julian followed my gaze and saw Marcus. The blood drained from his face. The rage was instantly replaced by a frantic, wild-eyed panic. He hadn't just assaulted his wife. He had done it in front of the one man who could and would use it to ruin him. Elara, why? He started, his voice suddenly desperate, reaching for me. But it was too late. The shock, the humiliation, the searing pain in my heart, and the relentless, cramping agony in my body, all converged into a single, cataclysmic moment. A hot, unstoppable gush of fluid broke free, soaking the tatters of my designer gown and pooling at my feet on the cold stone. My water had broken. The world narrowed to a pinprick of searing pain and stark reality. Julian's panicked face, the concerned face of Marcus Thorne through the glass. The cold stone beneath my soaked slippers, and the relentless tidal wave of a contraction that gripped my entire body, forcing a strangled cry from my lips. "Oh God!" Julian stammered, his eyes wide with horror, darting from the spreading puddle at my feet to the torn dress to the witness inside. His panic wasn't for me. It wasn't for our child. It was for himself, for the scandal now unfolding in real time. No, not now. We need to get you out of here, quietly. Quietly. I gasped, leaning against the cold stone balustrade for support as another contraction ripped through me. You think this can be handled quietly? Marcus Thorne, to his credit, didn't hesitate. He pushed the door open, his face a mask of concern. Is she all right? Someone call a doctor, he called back into the ballroom. His voice cut through the muffled music, and suddenly we were the center of the universe. Heads turned. The quiet gossip of the alcove erupted into a full-blown spectacle at the terrace doors. A crowd was gathering, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and morbid curiosity. They saw it all, me clutching my belly, my couture gown ripped open like a discarded wrapper. Julian, pale and frantic, the undeniable evidence of my water breaking, staining the pristine terrace. "Stay back. Give her some air," a man with a commanding voice ordered, pushing through the crowd. He was older, with kind eyes and a salt and pepper beard. "I'm Dr. Evans. I was a guest." "Ma'am, are you all right? How far apart are the contractions?" I could barely speak. The pain was all-consuming. "A few minutes, I think," I panted. Julian tried to take control, to spin the narrative. "It's all right, everyone. My wife is just a bit overwhelmed. We're fine, we have it handled." He tried to put his arm around me to guide me away, to hide the damage he'd done. I flinched away from his touch as if burned. "Don't you touch me!" I snarled, the words laced with a venom I didn't know I possessed. The crowd gasped. The king had been publicly rebuked. Dr. Evans knelt beside me, ignoring Julian completely. "Okay, we need to get you to a hospital, now. Can someone call for an ambulance?" "No ambulance!" Julian snapped, his voice tight with desperation. He was already pulling out his phone. "My private driver will take us. No sirens, no scene." He was calling his head of security, his PR agent, anyone who could contain this disaster. The next few minutes were a chaotic blur. Paramedics, summoned by a sensible gala staffer who ignored Julian, arrived with a stretcher. Julian argued with them, insisting on using his own car. But they were firm, their professionalism a stark contrast to his unraveling composure. As they carefully loaded me onto the stretcher, my torn dress was a flag of humiliation for all to see. I saw Beatrice, Julian's mother, at the edge of the crowd, her face a thunderous mask of fury and disgust, directed entirely at me. I was embarrassed by the Blackwood name. In her eyes, that was the only crime that had been committed. The ride to the hospital was an agony of pain and clarity. With every contraction that squeezed the life out of me, my mind became sharper, colder. The fog of my marriage, the denial, the excuses, the desperate hope that things would get better, evaporated. I saw Julian for exactly what he was, a hollow man, a bully, terrified of his own reflection. He sat in the ambulance beside me, not holding my hand, but furiously texting on his phone, trying to kill the story before it could be born. "They're already calling," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Page 6 has a tip. Someone from the gala." He looked at me, then his eyes burning with accusation. "This is a catastrophe, Elara. Do you have any idea what you've done?" The sheer audacity of his question was breathtaking. I didn't answer. I just breathed through the pain, focusing on the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor they had attached to me. One heartbeat for me. One strong and fast for my baby. My daughter. She was the only thing that mattered. We arrived at the hospital, sweeping through a private entrance Julian's team had arranged, bypassing the chaos of the public ER. They put us in a luxury birthing suite that looked more like a hotel room, but no amount of soft lighting or muted colors could hide the sterile reality of what was happening. I was in labor. My marriage was over. My life was about to be irrevocably changed. A kind, no-nonsense nurse named Maria came in to start the admission paperwork. Julian hovered by the door, still on his phone, his voice a low, angry buzz. "Okay, honey," Maria said, her voice a comforting balm. "We just need some basic information. Let's start with the easy stuff. Have you and your husband picked out a name for the baby?" I looked past her directly at Julian. He had just hung up the phone and was staring at me, his face a canvas of fury and blame. This was my fault. All of it. In his mind, I was the one who had ruined everything. A cold, diamond-hard resolve formed in my chest. He wanted to blame me. He thought I was nothing without him. I would show him what I was. I would give him something to remember this night for the rest of his miserable life. I would brand him with his own sin. I held his gaze, my voice clear and steady, loud enough for both the nurse and my husband to hear distinctly over the sound of the beeping monitor. "Yes," I said. "We have a name." Julian's head snapped up. An expression of faint relief flickered across his face, as if my compliance with this simple domestic task might somehow rewind the last hour. He thought we were a we again. He was a fool. Nurse Maria smiled, her pen poised over the form. "That's wonderful. And what is it?" I kept my eyes locked on Julian's. I wanted to see the exact moment his world fell apart. I wanted to watch the carefully constructed mask of the billionaire titan shatter into 1,000,000 pieces. The pain of another contraction was building a fire in my spine, but I welcomed it. It was fuel. I took a deep, shuddering breath. "Her name is Serafina," I said. The name dropped into the sterile silence of the room, like a stone into a perfectly still pond. The nurse paused her pen, hovering. Julian's face went blank with confusion, then slowly, horrifyingly began to drain of all color. He looked as if I had physically struck him. Seraphina. I spelled it out, my voice ringing with a terrible newfound power. "And her middle name will be Grace. Serafina Grace Blackwood." I added the grace as a final ironic twist of the knife. For the grace he never showed me. For the grace she would need to overcome his legacy. The nurse, sensing the radioactive tension in the room, just nodded slowly and wrote it down. "That's a beautiful name," she said, her professional calm faltering for just a second. Julian finally found his voice. It was a strangled, disbelieving whisper. "What did you say? You heard me." I said, my voice as cold as the terrace stone. "I'm naming our daughter after the woman you value more than your own family. The woman you were entertaining while your wife stood alone. The woman whose name you murmur in your sleep. I want to make sure you never ever forget her. Every time you look at your daughter, every time you sign a school permission slip, every time you hear her name called at graduation, you will think of this moment. You will think of what you did. I'm giving you that gift, Julian." He stared at me, his mouth agape. The titan of industry, the man who controlled boardrooms and manipulated markets, was utterly destroyed by a single word. He looked from me to the nurse, who was now studiously avoiding eye contact, and the full weight of the public official nature of my declaration crashed down on him. This wasn't a private threat. It was a statement on the record. You vindictive bitch," he stammered, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and shock. "You wouldn't dare. We'll change it." "No, we won't," I said calmly. "You see, Julian, you taught me so much about leverage. This is mine, and from this moment forward, you have no more power over me. You can't control this narrative, because the story is just too good. Billionaire Julian Blackwood's wife gives birth on the night of his biggest gala and names the baby after his well-known mistress. The headlines write themselves. Your investors in the Vanguard Fund will love that, won't they? Your mother will be so proud." Every word was a hammer blow striking at the foundations of his ego. He took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists, a flicker of the same violence from the terror in his eyes. Suddenly the door opened, and Dr. Evans walked in, followed by another nurse. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside. We need to prep your wife for delivery. Things are progressing very quickly." Julian looked cornered, trapped. He shot me a look of pure, undiluted hatred. It was the look of a king who had been deposed in his own throne room. Without another word, he turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The moment he was gone, a wave of exhaustion and pain washed over me. The adrenaline that had sustained me vanished, and I was left with only the raw, physical reality of childbirth. Tears streamed down my face, not for Julian, but for the life that was ending, for the terrifying and unknown life that was beginning, and for the innocent child I was bringing into this mess. Nurse Maria came to my side and took my hand. Her touch was firm and grounding. "You are one strong woman," she said softly, her eyes full of a sudden fierce respect. "Now let's go have this baby." As the medical team bustled around me, and the world dissolved into a vortex of pain and effort, I held on to one thought. I had lost my husband, my home, and the life I thought I knew. But in that hospital room, by speaking a single forbidden name, I had found my voice, and I would never let anyone silence it again. The hours that followed were a primal blur. The world shrank to the size of the hospital room, to the rhythm of my own breathing, to the crest and fall of unimaginable pain. Julian did not return. I was vaguely aware of his presence through the nurse's hushed whispers. He was in the hallway, pacing constantly on his phone, not a concerned father-to-be, but a general in a war room, fighting a battle of public relations. He was trying to contain the fallout from the bomb I had detonated. In the early hours of the morning, as the sky outside began to lighten from black to bruised purple, my daughter was born. She arrived with a startling, healthy cry. A tiny, perfect creature with a dusting of dark hair and my eyes. When they placed her on my chest, the world fell silent. All the anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it all melted away in the face of this overwhelming, all-consuming love. She was real. She was mine, and I would protect her with my life. For the first day, I existed in a quiet postpartum bubble with my baby. Julian sent a curt text. "We will discuss this when things have calmed down." There was no inquiry about my health or the baby's. It was a summons, not a message of concern. I didn't reply. The first visitor was not my husband, but his mother. Beatrice Blackwood swept into the room like a Siberian winter, her fur coat draped over her arm, her face frozen in a mask of regal fury. She didn't even glance at the bassinet. "I hope you're proud of yourself," she began, her voice low and sharp. "You have made a mockery of this family. You have dragged the Blackwood name through the mud." I looked at her, my exhaustion replaced by a weary strength. "The Blackwood name was already in the mud, Beatrice. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see it." "You will fix this," she commanded. "You will release a statement. You'll say you were overwrought hormonal, not in your right mind. You will change that child's ridiculous, spiteful name, and you will stand by your husband." I adjusted the sleeping baby in my arms. "No," I said, my voice quiet but unshakable. "I will not." "You foolish little girl," she sneered. "Julian will leave you with nothing. He has the best lawyers money can buy. He will take that child from you. You will be ruined." "Let him try," I said. "Tell Julian the prenuptial agreement he had me sign has a standard infidelity clause. I wonder how that will play out in court, now that the whole city seems to know who Serafina Moreau is. Tell him I'm no longer afraid of him. Now please leave my room." Beatrice stared at me, speechless, for the first time since I'd met her. She saw something in my eyes she had never seen before resolve. She turned on her heel and swept out the click of her Louboutins, a sharp, angry retreat. An hour later, Chloe arrived, her arms full of flowers and her face etched with worry. She had heard rumors, seen the frantic early morning news alerts. I told her everything: the dress, the terrace, the name. She listened, her eyes widening, and when I was done, she wrapped her arms around me. "Oh, Elara," she breathed. "I am so sorry, and so incredibly proud of you. What do you need? A lawyer, a place to stay, an army. Just say the word." Before I could answer, a hospital courier entered with a sleek black envelope. It had no return address, just my name typed on the front. Chloe and I exchanged a look. I carefully opened it. Inside was not a letter, but a small, high-end burner phone and a single folded note, its paper thick and expensive. The note was handwritten in a bold, decisive script. "Ms. Blackwood." I saw what happened on the terrace. No one should be treated that way. Julian Blackwood believes he is untouchable. He is not. This phone is secure. The only number saved in it is for Catherine Vance, the best divorce attorney in the city. Tell her I sent you. She is discreet and she is ruthless. My resources are at your disposal. He has underestimated you. Let's make him regret it. Sincerely, Marcus Thorne. I stared at the note, my heart pounding. An alliance. From the most unexpected of places, Julian's greatest enemy was offering to be my greatest ally. He wasn't doing it out of the goodness of his heart, of course. For Marcus, destroying Julian was business. But for me, it was survival. Chloe read the note over my shoulder, her jaw dropping. "Well, I'll be damned," she whispered. "The enemy of my enemy is about to fund your liberation." She pulled out her own phone, and her face went pale. "Elara, you need to see this." She turned the screen to me. It was a major financial news network. The headline was stark: Blackwood Innovations, stock plummets, 15% on rumors of CEO's personal indiscretions and scandal at charity gala. The story was vague, citing anonymous sources who witnessed a disturbing public altercation between Julian and his pregnant wife, followed by her dramatic medical emergency. It mentioned whispers of infidelity with a prominent tech rival. It didn't have the baby's name. Not yet. But the damage was already done. The invincible Julian Blackwood was bleeding, and the sharks were circling. I looked from the headline on Chloe's phone to the burner phone from Marcus Thorne in my hand, and then to the beautiful sleeping face of my daughter in the bassinet. The name Serafina had been a weapon, a declaration of war. But looking at her innocent face, I knew I couldn't burden her with it forever. The name had served its purpose. It had been the key that unlocked my cage. But my daughter deserved a name that was a blessing, not a curse. My war wasn't with this child. It was with her father. And it was just beginning. 3 months later, the world was a different color. The sterile grays and cold blues of Julian's penthouse had been replaced by the warm, creamy whites of my new, sun-drenched apartment. It was smaller, a 2-bedroom in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, and it was the most beautiful place I had ever lived. It was mine. The divorce was a brutal, ugly war, just as Beatrice had promised. Julian's lawyers came at me with everything they had. They tried to paint me as unstable a gold digger, an unfit mother. They leaked false stories to the press, trying to reframe the Gla incident as a hysterical outburst from a troubled hormonal woman. But they hadn't counted on Catherine Vance. Fueled by Marcus Thorne's seemingly bottomless resources and his network of private investigators, Catherine dismantled their attacks one by one. She produced sworn affidavits from gala staff who had witnessed Julian's aggression. She uncovered financial records showing lavish gifts and secret trips with Serafina Moreau. Marcus's team even found the doorman at the Carlisle, who remembered every time Julian and Serafina had slipped in through a private entrance. The infidelity clause in our prenup, once a piece of boilerplate legalese, became a ticking time bomb under Julian's empire. The story of the baby's name did eventually leak, and it was every bit as devastating as I had imagined. It became a legend in business circles, a cautionary tale about the high cost of hubris. Julian became a laughingstock, the butt of late-night jokes. The board of Blackwood Innovations, facing a full-blown shareholder revolt and a plunging stock price, indefinitely suspended him a polite term for a public execution. His empire, built on a foundation of ruthless control, had been brought down by an act of spectacular defiance he never saw coming. He fought for custody, of course, but it was a desperate, vindictive move. After a judge heard testimony about the events on the terrace and saw evidence of his ongoing affair, his petition was soundly denied. He was granted supervised visitation, which he rarely used. It seemed that looking at his daughter was, as I had intended, too painful a reminder of his downfall. One of the first things I did upon leaving the hospital was file the paperwork to legally change my daughter's name. It felt like the final act of my own liberation. She was no longer a symbol of Julian's betrayal. She was simply beautifully herself. I named her Grace. Grace Elara. My Grace. Today Grace was sleeping soundly in her crib, the afternoon sun casting a warm glow across her face. On my drafting table, spread across the surface where I used to eat my lonely meals, were the blueprints for my new life. I had started my own small architectural firm, Hearth Designs, specializing in the sustainable human-centered spaces I had always dreamed of creating. My first client, ironically, was a women's shelter funded by a generous anonymous donation that I was almost certain came from Marcus Thorne. The burner phone was gone, but the alliance remained. Marcus and I never met, but our lawyers communicated. We were bound by a shared enemy, and perhaps a mutual unspoken respect. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. "You will not believe who just got pushed out as CEO of Phoenix Dynamics. Looks like Serafina's board wasn't thrilled about her being the other woman in the biggest tech scandal of the decade. Karma's a bitch, isn't it?" A small, wry smile touched my lips. It seemed Julian had a habit of destroying the women in his life, one way or another. I felt a fleeting, surprising pang of pity for her, another casualty of Julian's narcissistic orbit. But it passed quickly. My focus was no longer on their world of hostile takeovers and back-page scandals. It was here in this sunlit room, with the scent of baby powder and fresh coffee and the quiet promise of the future I was building with my own two hands. I looked down at my daughter. My Grace. The world would know her father as a fallen tyrant, a man who ripped his pregnant wife's dress in a fit of rage. But I would make sure she knew her mother as the woman who, when faced with ruin, stitched together a new life from the tatters, stronger and more beautiful than before. The foundation wasn't his name or his money. It was me, and our foundation was finally solid. 18 months is a lifetime. In 18 months, a newborn learns to crawl, then walk, then run head-first into a future she knows nothing about. My daughter Grace was now a whirlwind of chubby-cheeked smiles and determined first steps, her world a happy, sunlit universe of board books and building blocks. In those same 18 months, my own life had transformed. Hearth Designs was no longer just a dream sketched on a drafting table. It was a reality. We'd completed several small residential projects, earning a quiet reputation for clean, empathetic design. Now we had our first major contract, the Kensington Community Arts Centre. It was the kind of project I had always yearned for, a space for everyone meant to nurture creativity and connection. The architectural antithesis of the cold glass and steel world I had escaped. It was a flagship project that would put my firm on the map, proving that I was more than just Julian Blackwood's infamous ex-wife. It was my declaration of independence built of brick and mortar. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. I received a call from the City Zoning Commission. A sudden anonymous complaint had been filed citing an obscure environmental ordinance that put an immediate halt to our foundation work. My permits, which had been meticulously approved months earlier, were now under review. My lawyer assured me it was likely a bureaucratic hiccup, but it felt wrong. It felt targeted. A week later, the second crack appeared. A prominent local arts blog, one that had previously championed the project, published a scathing opinion piece. It didn't mention me by name, but referred to the centre's architect as a society dilettante whose inexperience and scandal-plagued background put the entire publicly funded project at risk. The tone was vicious, the language designed to poison the well of public opinion. The third crack shattered my fragile peace. Our primary investor, a well-respected local philanthropist, pulled his funding. He was apologetic but firm. "My board is getting nervous, Ilara," he'd said over the phone, his voice strained. "The whispers, the reputational risk is becoming too great. I'm sorry." That night, after putting Grace to bed, I sat in my darkened living room. The project blueprints spread before me, like a map to a city under siege. This wasn't random bad luck. It was a coordinated attack. It was organized, well-funded, and designed to hit me where I was most vulnerable. My work, my reputation, my new beginning. There was only one person with the resources, the malice, and the motivation to orchestrate such a campaign: Julian. Chloe confirmed my fears the next day, her voice grim over the phone. "I've been digging Ilara. It's him. He's been quietly setting up a web of shell corporations and LLCs for months. He's not on any of the paperwork, but my source says he's the ghost in the machine. He's been buying influence, paying off media contacts, pulling strings at City Hall. He's not just coming after your business. He's trying to erase you." A cold dread, a feeling I hadn't felt since the night of the gala, washed over me. I had thought his public humiliation would be the end, but I had been naive. A narcissist like Julian doesn't accept defeat. He waits, he plots, he festers, and when his target finally feels safe, he strikes from the shadows. "What do I do, Chloe?" I whispered, watching Grace stack blocks on the rug, blissfully unaware of the monster trying to tear her mother's world down. "You fight back," Chloe said, her voice fierce. "He thinks you're still the same woman he can push around. You need to find his leverage point, the person he's using to make this happen, and you need to break it." Her words lit a fire in me. She was right. I would not be a victim again. Catherine Vance, my lawyer, helped me trace the zoning complaint. It originated from a community activist group. No one had ever heard of a group whose funding, we discovered, flowed from a charitable fund that was in turn a subsidiary of one of Julian's new shell corporations. The complaint was being championed by a city councilman, Robert Morrison, a man who had previously been one of the Arts Centre's most vocal supporters. He was the linchpin. I decided I had to confront him. Playing by the rules wouldn't work when my opponent owned the rule book. I called his office pretending to be a constituent, wanting to discuss the project. His secretary, after much hesitation, scheduled a brief meeting for me at a quiet restaurant downtown, a neutral ground. I arrived early, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I chose a discreet booth and waited, rehearsing my arguments, my threats, my pleas. 10 minutes after our scheduled time, a figure slid into the seat across from me. But it wasn't Councilman Morrison. It was a woman. Her copper hair was cut in a sharp, severe bob. She wore a simple but expensive black dress, her face thinner than I remembered, etched with a new hard-won tension. Her eyes, a startling shade of green, met mine across the table. They were not the eyes of a triumphant rival, but of a fellow soldier in a war she was also losing. It was Serafina Moreau. "He's not coming," she said, her voice a low, even murmur that cut through the restaurant's quiet hum. "Julian sent me instead. He thought it would be poetic." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. Of all the moves Julian could have made, this was the one I never would have anticipated. Sending the ghost of our shared past to haunt my present. It was a power play of breathtaking cruelty. "What do you want?" I finally managed to ask, my voice colder than I intended. A flicker of something weariness, maybe even regret, crossed her face before being replaced by a pragmatic mask. "To talk," she said simply. She signaled for a waiter. "2 coffees, and we won't be ordering." The waiter nodded and vanished. Serafina's air of command, it seemed, was something she would never lose. "I have nothing to say to you," I said, making a move to stand. "Sit down, Elara," she said, her tone not threatening, but surprisingly direct. "Believe it or not, I am not your enemy, not anymore. We have a much bigger, more destructive mutual enemy in your ex-husband." I hesitated, then slowly sank back into my seat. "You're orchestrating his attacks on my business. You're helping him ruin me. How does that not make you my enemy?" "I'm not orchestrating anything," she countered, her green eyes holding mine. "I'm a pawn, just like Councilman Morrison, just like the investor who pulled his funding. When Julian was forced out of Blackwood Innovations, he didn't just lose his company. He lost his power, his prestige. And he blames 2 people for that, you for the spectacular way you exposed him and me for existing." The coffee arrived, and she took a slow sip before continuing. "He came to me a few months ago. My own career was in shambles after the scandal. He offered me a deal. Use my remaining contacts and my strategic skills to help him rebuild his portfolio from the shadows, and in return, he would help restore my reputation. It was a lie, of course. What he really wanted was a weapon he could control. He's been systematically bankrupting me, bleeding my accounts dry while using my name and connections to wage his petty wars. This attack on you, it's being funded with what's left of my money." The revelation was staggering. The woman I had viewed as a co-conspirator was just another victim, caught in the same web, her life being dismantled with the same cold, calculated precision as mine. "He doesn't just want to see you fail, Elara," Serafina said, leaning forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He wants to see you destitute. He wants you to come crawling back to him completely broken, so he can have the satisfaction of turning you away. He wants to take your daughter. That's his endgame." The mention of Grace sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This was no longer about a building. This was about my child. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my suspicion warring with a dawning, terrifying understanding. "Because I'm done being his collateral damage," she said, her jaw tight with anger. "And because I know something you don't. Julian's new empire isn't just vengeful, it's illegal. He's into money laundering, offshore tax evasion, things that would send him to prison, not just to the gossip pages. I have proof, records, account numbers, everything." She reached into her handbag and placed a small, sleek silver flash drive on the table between us. It lay there, innocuous and small, yet humming with the potential to create a cataclysm. "This is everything," she said. "But if I give it to the authorities myself, he'll destroy me. He's made it look like I'm complicit in all of it. But you're the wronged ex-wife, the mother of his child. They will believe you." Here it was, the devil's bargain. "And what do you want in return?" I asked. "Immunity for one. My lawyer thinks it's possible if I'm the key witness in a case brought by you. And something else. When this is over, I want you to give a single interview. In it, you will state that you believe I was as much a victim of Julian's manipulation and control as you were. It won't fix everything, but it will give me a fighting chance to rebuild my life. It's a small price to pay for your freedom. Wouldn't you agree?" My mind raced. Could I trust her? The woman who had slept with my husband, whose name had been my battle cry. Could I align myself with the person who represented the deepest betrayal of my life? The very idea was repulsive. But then I looked at the flash drive. It represented a final end to Julian's reign of terror. It was a path to a future where Grace and I would be truly, unequivocally safe, no longer looking over our shoulders for his next attack. Fighting him through lawyers and zoning commissions was a war of attrition I might not win. This was a single, decisive strike. I thought about Julian's face on the terrace, twisted with rage. I thought about the sound of the ripping silk. I thought about his cold, empty eyes in the hospital. Serafina was right. He wouldn't stop. Ever. My choice was clear. This wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about friendship. It was about survival. It was a strategy, a lesson Julian himself had inadvertently taught me. Slowly, I reached across the table. My fingers closed around the cool metal of the flash drive. "All right, Serafina?" I said, my voice steady. "You have a deal." She gave a single sharp nod, a flicker of relief in her eyes. "He wanted poetry," she murmured, a bitter smile on her lips. "He's about to get it. The two women he tried to ruin working together to burn his kingdom to the ground. That's a story that will outlive us all." I slipped the drive into my pocket. It felt as heavy as a stone and as powerful as a sword. Leaving the restaurant, I stepped out into the bright afternoon sun. No longer a victim defending her small patch of earth, but a warrior on the verge of launching an invasion. The battle for the Arts Center was over. A much larger war was about to begin. Elara's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes hitting rock bottom is the very thing that allows you to build a new, stronger foundation. She was stripped of her dignity in front of the world, but in that moment of ultimate humiliation, she found a voice she never knew she had. She took the pain, the betrayal, and the cruelty, and she forged it into a weapon not of revenge, but of liberation for herself and her daughter. Her journey from a gilded cage to a life of her own design is a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. If Ilara's story of finding her strength in the face of darkness moved you, please show your support by giving this video a like and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next real-life drama. And I want to hear from you. What do you think was the most powerful moment of Ilara's story? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for listening.